I'd like to call to order this meeting, regular meeting of the Mount Pleasant City Commission on Monday, June 26th, 2023. And I'd like everyone to stand if they're willing and able for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Mount Pleasant City Commission recognizes the Anishinaabe, whose ancestral lands the city stands upon today. We acknowledge the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe and recognize that the three bands of Ojibwe, Saginaw, Black Creek, Black River, and Swan Creek have resided on this land for over 200 years. Our acknowledgement of the full history of the tribe and our commitment to be good stewards of these ancestral lands is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those ancestors who came before us. We give thanks to the generous care with which the Anishinaabe and those members of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan have given and continue to give to this land and our community. And can I ask the clerk to take the roll, please?
Commissioner Asman?
Here.
Commissioner Bush? Here. Commissioner Chapman?
Here.
Commissioner Eke is absent. Commissioner Wingard?
Here.
Vice Mayor Alsteiger?
Here.
And Mayor Perschbacher is absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, our next thing on our agenda is proclamations and presentations. And the first one is presentation of funds for the Neighborhood Enhancement Program.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here this evening to introduce to you a representative from Michigan State Housing Development Authority. She's here this evening to present the City of Mount Pleasant with a check from Round 8 of the Neighborhood Enhancement Program for $75,000. With this funds, year to date, or from the beginning of our program, we've been able to put back or make available over $300,000 towards 35 owner-occupied home remodeling projects. So that's a very positive thing that we're very proud of. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Lauren Smith from MSHDA.
Hello, my name is Lauren Smith. I am the Neighborhood Enhancement Program Specialist with MSHDA, and I'm here to present this check to the City of Mount Pleasant for $75,000. I would just like to thank you for partnering with MSHDA to help the homeowners in your city.
Thank you. And we would like to get a picture of this evening.
Okay. Oh, everybody.
Oh, everybody.
Okay.
Oh. Oh, sure, sure thing, yes.
Sure. I know it's mine.
Oh, yeah.
Photogenic as Chandler Ring. Friends.
Okay, our next thing on our agenda is an update from Jim McBride.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. If you take a look on the inside of your packet, there's a memo from me, and I want to just hit a couple of the highlights of that. I know there's some newer members on the commission who may not have been there when these property tax abatements were originally approved. But just to talk a little bit about what this is and what it means. Mostly, we're talking about real property, but in some cases in the past, there have been abatements for personal property, which would be machinery and equipment. However, that's now gone away because the state has phased out the personal property tax for machinery and equipment with companies where they pay a very small percentage of what they used to pay. So that's no longer really an issue. But you continue to see property tax abatements done at the municipal level for real property situations. So the second paragraph there, in addition to the 73 jobs created by the companies that received these abatements, another 74 jobs were retained due to these tax abatements. The job numbers in this year's report are going to be lower than before because we've had some drop off. So as these expire, they drop off, and then that's going to lower the numbers. But those abatements were done before, and those expansions were made, and those people were hired. They're still there, but they're not showing up on the report anymore. If we could go to the next page. And this is the breakdown, and, these are the numbers, the actual times. And I joined Middle Michigan in the middle of 2015. So if you look at a lot of these dates here, many of these were passed by the commission before I arrived. So the ones that were passed after I arrived were the third one for American Mitsuba, and that's, I think, the only one. Yeah, that's true. Although we did have a revision I'll talk about with Mac LTT. So the first three, I want to really, maybe tell the story behind the numbers a little bit. The first three are to American Mitsuba prior to taking the name American Mitsuba, which is based on it's the North American headquarters for Mitsuba, Japan. They were known as CME Corporation, but exactly the same corporation. Been in the Mount Pleasant, in the Smart Zone area for many, many years. I think we celebrated their 35th anniversary just a few years ago. And you can see that we've done three of them, and you can see some jobs were retained, and especially on the last one, not just jobs retained, but jobs created. I'll talk about that one because I was here for that. We had a situation where they needed to put in additional capacity to an additional stamping machine because they were getting contracts from other companies that they hadn't had before. They primarily are a parts manufacturer, electric motors for Honda and other Japanese car makes. However, they received a contract from BMW and one from Ford to make similar electric motors for those two companies. They needed to expand. They had another plant down in Kentucky that had excess room that they wouldn't have to expand the building. They could have done it there. So we were in a contest with Kentucky, and they had incentives on the table. The MEDC put forward $360,000 business development grant, and the city of Mount Pleasant put forward the property tax abatement that you see here. And the combination of those two things caused American Mitsuba to do the expansion here. So we got the building, we knocked out the back of the building, added a whole section on, put a new stamping machine there, and they hired the additional people. That was a big success story. And it couldn't have been done without the city commission's help, though. Q-Sage, that's an interesting company. They're in the South Industrial Park. They make custom seed sorting equipment. So these big giant screens that you can sort, seeds from rocks and other things, and they sell these to big farms in North America, but also they export around the world. So they have such a niche product that very few competitors, but they were being wooed to leave the area and to locate closer to some of their core markets. We were able to keep them here with the property tax abatements. I'll skip ahead. I'll do Mac LTT last. JJ Management, that's Kaminsky Construction. This was for some CNC machinery, some updating so that the cabinet making could be state-of-the-art, and they would be able to compete even more so with the number of competitors out there and strengthen that company. So that was another big one. Mac LTT, that's a little more of a complicated story. Originally, this one was given to Dayco. It's an auto parts manufacturer. And I know Mary remembers them, but Dayco, they had three plants in Michigan, one in Canada, one in Oklahoma. And they made a corporate decision to move everything down to Mexico, headquarters, everything down to Mexico. We talked to them, we tried to get them to reconsider. The decision had already been made. So we were going to have a humongous vacancy in the South Industrial Park as a result. It's the biggest building in the South Industrial Park on Gover Parkway if you drive in. And so at the same time, a company called Mack LTT out of Kent, Ohio, purchased the stainless steel tanker division, manufacturing division of Birch Tank. Birch Tank's located, or was located, right on Industrial Drive near the Home Depot in Union Township. And so they purchased it, agreed to stay there for up to 2 years, but then the plan was to move the stainless steel manufacturing back to Kent, Ohio, where they have their main factory. So we had this, all of a sudden had this building available, and we talked to them, and again, the MEDC stepped up, the state, and you folks stepped up with the property tax abatement. We were able to get Mack LTT to move in to the Dayco building as soon as it was vacant. And then all we did was continue, you guys switched over, which legally we were able to do. The abatement that had been intended for Dayco was now switched to Mack LTT. And they didn't even get a full 12 years. They got the balance. And so that was a huge thing. We were able to keep them here. They actually employ more people than Dayco did, and they filled that building and having a tremendous expansion to their business, and kept that stainless steel tanker production right here in Mount Pleasant. So that's kind of the story behind the abatements. So I would just say that without these abatements, I can tell you that a lot of this business would have left our area. So that's why we do it, and thank you for continuing to support that. And I may be back someday again to ask for another one, but not right now. So any questions?
I guess none. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
Right now, if the commission doesn't mind, I'd like to make a minor change in the agenda under receipt of petitions and communications to move what was number 4 up to number 3 under proclamations, and then keep the other 2 where they are. And that's because we got a proclamation to read.
Oh,
Okay, you good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we're going to have a third item under proclamations. And this one was given to us from the library board, and here it goes. Whereas Tom Delia has served as a member of the board of directors of the Chippewa River District Library since 1994. Whereas Tom Delia retired from the board of directors on June 9th, 2023. Whereas Tom Delia has been an invaluable counselor to this Board of Trustees and to the management of the library, serving in various leadership capacities in growing the library, including the formation of the Chippewa River District Library System, serving as co-chair for the capital campaign to renovate the Veterans Memorial Library, and member of numerous committees. Whereas during his tenure, the library passed 3 millages, passed a capital campaign leading to Veterans Memorial Library's renovation, purchased the old post office to utilize as office and event space for the library, and renovated 4 branch libraries. Whereas over his service to the library, Tom Delia distinguished himself with his deep knowledge and abilities related to community matters, and the expertise and leadership developed during his service have been invaluable to the library during his tenure. Whereas Tom Delia has also pursued the enhancement of the Mount Pleasant community, both personally and professionally, as evidenced by his past involvement with civic and charitable organizations. His leadership was consistently honest, insightful, and selfless. Now therefore, let it be resolved that the Board of Trustees, and this is of the library board, the Board of Trustees hereby expresses its gratitude to Tom Delia for his service on the Board of Trustees, for his sound business advice and valued counsel, and for all that he has contributed to the Board of Trustees and the library, and further resolved that the Board of Trustees wishes Tom Delia continued success in all his endeavors and express our hope for his continued health, happiness, and prosperity. That'll be something for our appointments committee to work on, I think. Okay, so then we are to receipt of petitions and communications for Manager DeSense.
I think we have a public input on agenda items and the additions and deletions to the agenda as well.
Oh, I goofed. All right, so I will first ask if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to approach the microphone. You would have 5 minutes to speak, and you'll be asked to give your name and address. No. All right, so then the next question is, do we have anyone on Zoom?
Nobody on Zoom.
And anyone that has sent an email?
No comments.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, oh, no, I was skipping ahead. All right. So now we're ready for those communications.
We do have additions and deletions to the agenda. My apologies. We still have to make sure there's no additions and deletions to the agenda first.
Oh,
and then
because
we'll go.
I made a change, but that's not an addition. Okay, any additions or deletions to the agenda? All right, seeing none, now we'll move forward.
All right, receipt of petitions and communications includes the receipt of the annual Industrial Facilities Tax Abatement Report from Middle Michigan Development Corporation and minutes of the Downtown Development Authority from April.
Okay, and then next on the agenda are the consent items. Are there any items on this portion of the agenda that the commission wishes to be elsewhere in the agenda? Okay, Manager DeSense.
Yep. Consent agenda items this evening includes the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting held June 12, 2023. Consider a 1-year extension to the municipal recycling curbside collection services contract with Mid-Michigan Industries. Consider approval of a contract with Gateway Refrigeration for the replacement of 2 boilers serving the public safety building, and approve accompanying budget amendment for $99,590. That's the contract with Gateway Refrigeration. And consider approval of payrolls and warrants.
Okay. All right, so then I guess I need to ask for a motion to approve those items.
I move to approve the consent items.
And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor say yes,
Yes.
and no one left to refuse? Okay, all right, so I see we have no public hearings on the agenda, so the next thing is one item of new business.
So I'll go ahead and tee up our staff for this one. The consider approval of a contract with RCL Construction for Phase 2 Water Resource Recovery Facility upgrades. The City of Mount Pleasant received a single bid for Phase 2 of our Water Resource Recovery Facility reconstruction project. The initial bid was $10 million over the initial budget. Ahead of receiving bids, the city anticipated the cost would come in higher given that this is what other municipalities are seeing at this time. Staff and the city's contracted engineers at Fishbeck have reviewed the bid and have lowered the contract to $25.8 million. City staff is here to give an overview of the city's options, but is recommending that the city move forward with this bid amount. Staff will present the anticipated cost increase to the average utility rate payer and be able to answer any questions that the city commission may have. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Director of Public Works, Tim Middleton.
Good evening, Commission. I'm here tonight to give you some updates and add some additional information to the request I have in front of you tonight for the Water Resource Recovery Facility Phase 2 upgrades. In addition, I'll be asking you to approve a motion tonight so that we have a resolution for SRF funding as well, although that's not in that request. So I think, as you know, right now, we are currently in phase one of what we call the WRF upgrade, just for short. And along with that, we plan for doing phase two improvements as well. Our original estimate on this project was $21 million, and we bid that out about May 1st. So it had about a 6-week window of time for bidders to bid on it. On June 13th, we received the bids, or bid in this case, and that bid was $28.1 million approximately. So that's about a 34% increase over our original estimates. We had one bidder, and that was RCL Construction of Sanford, Michigan. RCL is currently the contractor on phase one project. We've been very happy with their work at this time, and they've been very helpful in working through phase two improvements as well. So because it is such a large amount, it's certainly incumbent on us to look at this and decide what is in the best interest of the ratepayers of the city of Mount Pleasant. And so we looked at 4 options or alternatives. And the major ones would be that we accept the bid as is and move forward. We reject the bid entirely and rebid that amount out. Or we apply value engineering and request from deducts from the general contractor, or that we simply do nothing and continue on as we've been doing all along. So I'm going to cover each of these just a little bit. So option 1, accept the bid as is and move forward, would require an additional $10 million approximately beyond the current SRF funding. So as of right now, we have a request out to the state revolving fund to increase that amount regardless of what we do, but we're working on a timeline, and so we have to keep those things in order and moving along. The impacts on rates to accept it as is would be $306 per month in '24, $381 in '25, and $1.91 in '26. So there'd certainly be some impact on the rates. Option 2 would be reject that bid entirely and go back out to the market with it. The inherent problems with that would be that we would remove the city from the current state revolving fund timeline. So that would most likely cause us to lose our $9 million in grant funding that we've already received towards this project. I don't think we want to do that. I feel that we're very unlikely to receive additional bids at better prices. Having looked around at the market and talked to the state, we can see that other similar projects are coming in that same range. These last 3 numbers here are bids that have come out recently. So Hart had a project in the last couple of weeks, estimated at 9.5. Their low bid was 16.9. Owasso was estimated at 18, come in at 23.38. Kingsford is a water project. It was estimated at 7.08 and come in at 8.4. So we're certainly seeing these numbers around the state. I talked to a representative at State Revolving Fund, and she told us that our numbers were certainly in line with what they've got coming in this year for bids. So I don't think there's any advantage to going back out and rebidding this at this time. In fact, it's possible those numbers could come back higher. Option 3, which is the one we've been pursuing for the last 2 weeks, is to apply some value engineering to the project and request deducts from the general contractor. So RCL has been very helpful at that. They've really went to bat. They've looked at the project. Our engineers have looked at the project. We've looked at the project. We've certainly done some work on this. So right now we stand at a potential $2.289 million in deducts from the project. So those are things that maybe we've trimmed down a little bit, a couple things that we've kicked out a couple of years, and just took the things that were absolutely super critical to the project and said, this is what we have to keep. This is what we can consider taking out of the project. So right now, after deducts and value engineering, we're at $25.871 million. Impacts to rates at that price were similar, but somewhat less. So annual bond payments after $9 million in state revolving fund loan forgiveness causes a $921,000 a year payment, assuming a 30-year loan. There will be no change to the current rate for the amount we charge per 1,000 gallons, so that would stay the same. And we're currently at $12.22 monthly for 2023. So in '24, we would add $15.28, or we'd be at $15.28 which is a 25% increase over '23. And in '25, we'd have another 25% increase, which would bring us to 1909 monthly for the monthly user rate. An option 4 that we looked at is simply to do nothing. There are certainly some problems built into that. We've been limping the plant along for quite some time already. The rotating biological contactors have been running nonstop for 376,000 hours roughly. So the rated life on those bearings, I believe, are around 109,000 hours, if I recall correctly. So we've already certainly got our value out of this system. But it is slowly crumbling away. All the boxes, all the media, everything is just simply deteriorating. 3 of the 5 primary clarifiers have been in service since '57, so they've been there for 66 years. I'm coming up on 54, and I'm starting to feel a little tired at 54, so I'm thinking the primaries, which run 24/7, got to be feeling a little tired too. And then the bio towers, which are the newest portion of the plant and really put in 2001, have been running nonstop as well for 22 years. So they're well into their maintenance curve, but they're extremely expensive to maintain and extremely expensive to rebuild. So they don't really make very good sense right now as a good wastewater alternative. So tonight, staff, myself, is recommending that you move forward with the amended value engineered project. We have moved forward with requesting additional SRF funding, which we don't have an answer for yet. And this motion to approve this contract is contingent on receiving financing, so it is potentially may not go forward depending on the financing options. And we're seeking that contingent approval from you tonight based on SRF funding and asking to award a tentative contract to RCL of Sanford. What questions can I answer for you?
How come nobody else wants to bid that?
So the SRF money is really just being poured on by the federal government right now, and there's just a ton of money available. And so everybody has got work to do, and nobody wants to travel far. The mobilization costs, why bid those jobs if you can stay close to home and do it? And there just simply is not a lot of subcontractors available right now to do that work.
Okay.
So we're very limited. It's not unique to us. We're hearing the same complaints everywhere.
I talked with Commissioner Hasman beforehand, and he's going to take over Commissioner Eke's portion of questions for the evening, but thank you, Paul. Let's see, that was my first question, was number of bids. Largest impacts of the cost, like what was kind of like the big things that like caused it to be so over what we budgeted for? Is there any like particular areas that did that, or?
You know, I really think I just hit that with the last answer, truly, is that there's just so much available money right now to do those kind of projects. There just simply isn't enough contractors to fill the void.
Okay.
And so there's not a lot of bidders happening. We're seeing projects with 1 or 2 bidders. And there was a time when we would have 9, 10, 11, 12 bidders on projects, and we're just not seeing that anymore. And the price of materials is up in general. Inflation is driving things. Labor rates are high. I don't know that there's any particular one thing in that, but I certainly think that available funding is a big driver in high prices, which is kind of counterproductive, I think, to what they really wanted to achieve by doling that money out.
Other question?
I was just going to make a comment. I just encountered that steel has gone up in price about 4 times in the last 3 years. So if there's any steel in it, that alone could be pretty drastic. But additionally, I just think it's safe to say that even if it's not directly related, this is something that the public is acutely aware of, because it was less than a year ago that we had a water emergency. And so I think that it's very good work done by the city staff and extreme due diligence done. And I think we're lucky to have these contractors.
Just going back, we were talking about deduction decisions. what was the philosophy or the kind of the strategy going into making those valued engineering decisions on like what could be cut and like where we could like what cost? Can you talk about your strategy for cost saving measures?
So critical processes, of course, get precedence. What are those things that we absolutely cannot cut or don't make sense to cut? And then we've got projects built in there too that may have been in capital improvements already. And we looked at those and said, can we kick them out a couple years? But when we look at a project this size, we're also looking at even if it starts at the end of this year, which would be the plan, it's still another 2 years out before it's completed. So you're looking at a project that doesn't even wrap up till 2025. And when we start talking about kicking projects out 2, 3, 4 years, we're on top of them the very moment that this project gets finished, if they hold out that long. So some of those are just kind of fall into that category. And I don't know that we gain much by doing that. Some of it is just stuff that we said, we can limp that along a little longer. And if it does die in the interim, we can handle replacing that on the fly. And then some of it was just how much do you really want to cut? How much security do you want to give the next staff that has to run that plant for 20 years? And so when I look forward and I think, if I take this away today, what does it do to the operators down the road? And does it create a future problem that we don't want to create because we didn't, leave that $40,000 in there on a piece? I should know this, but it seems like there's about 35 line items that we considered taking out. And we took out some things we weren't comfortable taking out, but it was kind of a balancing act. So I don't know that there's a single definitive answer to that, other than to say we looked at the things and said, okay, these are the things that must stay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that to care about the people after you and how what you're doing now is going to affect them.
It's a careful balancing act. The other thing I don't want to do is I don't want to tie the hands of the finances for the city down the road either, because there'll be more work coming down the road, right? And so we don't want to make it so we can't do work in the future either.
I think this should be the last question for me. I'm just talking about like cost to the consumers. We're talking rates for 5/8 meters, I believe is what I saw. Not a homeowner myself, could you talk to me about what a 5/8 meter is, like from household to household? Is that standardized what we're looking at?
Yep, so 5/8 meters is standard residential home meter, and that by far is the vast majority of meters in the city.
Perfect, thank you.
I have a question. You talked about the funds from the federal government and state government. Is there a timeline on that use?
Yep, so there's, they give us what they call a milestone form, and it's got a very set of specific times that things have to be completed by to stay in that program. As far as the actual grant itself, when we send in the intent to apply, I might have to look over my shoulder on this one, but we tell them over what time frame that will be used in, and then that becomes part of the plan.
Have those dates already been solidified?
I'm sorry, say that.
Have the dates already been solidified on the milestones, or is that once
yes.
the project starts?
Yep, yeah, all the milestone dates have been signed and solidified already.
And do they coincide with that 2-year time frame that you talked about for completion?
Yes, so when we send that form in, we tell them our substantial and final completion dates, and then we have to land within that, within some degree of reason. I believe that you can get extensions if the job goes beyond that and there's reasonable cause for it. I would have to look at that to speak to it very specifically, but basically, yes.
What about an extension for a lack of, contractor services? It seems like we're kind of held over the barrel with just one.
I think if you couldn't get one, you could probably go and make that argument, but I haven't asked that question.
I have a question. Is phase 2 the last phase, or is there a phase 3?
This phase 2 is the last phase as far
good.
as improving, yes.
All right. So is it appropriate for us to add in a motion on this one?
It is. I'm wondering though if I can maybe address one of the issues of timeline as well too, because I think if I could, yeah, that was, I think, what you were getting at. We had talked about that internally, looking at our options and said, what could we do if we wanted to push this thing out? A few things though that I think we have to think about in terms of doing that. We would have to communicate with the state and see if that's an option to be able to push this out. But the state's regulations are pretty well solidified. So unless there's something that we're not familiar with, we feel like more than likely what's going to happen is we'd essentially get kicked out of this round. We'd have to reapply, go through the process again. That's more time. That's not really that much of a big issue or anything like that. But a few different concerns with that. And one, the time, as that continues to move forward, we have a concern for some of the infrastructure at the water resource recovery facility. And we had talked about then some of these components, as Deputy Director Middleton had noted, even in our current timeline, might not be getting touched for 2 to 3 years. And there's even still some concern about some of those components, given that 2 to 3 year timeline, some of those priority components. And as we talked about that internally with staff, it was, well, if this fails or if this issue happens, we could be in violation with Eagle. And to us, that really became kind of a non-starter at that point to talk to the city commission about, let's try to roll the dice and try to maybe get some better bidding in the future, and to come at this another time. We were just too concerned with that. We felt that the risk was too great, and so we didn't want to move forward with that kind of a recommendation for the possibility of saving money. And then one of the issues could be then you get yourself into a point where, okay, let's just say we did that, we roll the dice, we move forward, and we rebid in a future year. If those bids don't come back any better, we really have nowhere to move. And then what if those bids actually come in even worse than where we're currently at? So again, it was a lot of risk moving forward with a consideration like that. It could reward us, it could pay off. But again, we felt that the risks were too great in that we could have worse prices or we could have a violation with Eagle if some of our infrastructure does fail within that period of time. So I wanted to be able to address that. One thing I do want to note about the recommendation being made this evening too, as I just want to get some of the language right for the city commission. We are asking the city commission for a motion granting the contract to RCL Construction Company in the amount of $25,871,555 and permit the mayor and clerk to sign the contract contingent on available financing and pending value engineering. So I just want to make sure that that clarification gets to the city commission.
If we were reading from like the information presented to us, would we need to, so contingent on available financing and pending value engineering, there's nothing in there about like the mayor, the clerk authorizing anything. Do we need to include that?
We would need to include that, correct, yes.
Okay, so I guess what I'm asking for is a motion to approve the contract with RCL Construction Company for all the contingencies mentioned, the price and et cetera. So that's where we are, asking for a motion.
I'll give it a crack. I motion for the city to award the contract for the Phase 2 Water Resource Recovery Facility upgrades to RCL Construction for $25,871,555, contingent on available financing and pending value engineering, and authorizing the mayor and the clerk to authorize such a contract, assuming additional SRF funds funding for this project is available through the concurrent issuance of bonds.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Right, is there any other discussion?
It's a lot of money.
A lot of words.
You know, if I can even note on that as well too, and I do want to commend the staff for doing a good job, because when we got these bids back, we really were putting our heads together, scratching, slept on it, came back to it the next day, really worked the numbers inside and out. So I got to commend the staff and the engineering team for being able to get us from 28 million down to the 25 million and change. You know, not a small amount by any means, but one thing I would say, just as if I was talking to other ratepayers in the room, which I am as well too, I think Deputy Director Director Middleton did a good job of clarifying, none of this is due to any sort of improper handling or anything like that. And in fact, one could argue the exact opposite. As he had noted, the bearings on a particular piece of the equipment were 3 times what their lifetime was. I mean, if that says anything about the maintenance capabilities and the care that our staff gives these components, I think that speaks very loudly that we are doing our proper maintenance and everything like that. We just came to a time where the several components of the plant are at the end of their life cycle, and we happen to be in a time where construction costs are going extremely high. And I know this group recalls we've done streets that were 20-30% above budget. We've done, I'm trying to think, a few other projects as well that were also above budget as well too. Boilers, just talking about that tonight as well too. Obviously, this one comes in at a much, much higher dollar value here. But again, I think that the money is well spent. It's definitely well worth it to move forward with a project. Again, the alternative in pushing some of these components out, you really start to just increase risk over time that something unfortunate happens at the plant. So.
Well said. Okay, all those in favor say yes.
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 I think it needs a seconded still.
Oh, I second it.
Oh, you did? Oh, yes.
Yeah, we had a second.
Yes.
No.
Okay. Yes. Okay. All right, next thing, we get to make announcements, staff and commission, if you have any announcements on city-related items or new business. I have one to start us off. We had talked about having a presence at the farmer's market, and I did 3 of the 5 hours on Saturday, and we had a set up right next to the Parks and Rec group, and they had a table with different piles of information, and the only thing we didn't have was a sign. But what I did was I kept calling over people I knew, and then they would take information, so I think it was really well received. So, yeah, it went well for the Saturday. We're also probably going to have an opportunity to have a presence on Thursday. Anyway.
Great.
Yeah. Any other announcements? I do have one other. I was on the MML Monday Zoom call that they do sometimes, and it happened as we were on the Zoom call that one of the state directors said that just came across that Michigan as a state was awarded $1.5 billion for the infrastructure broadband accessibility, the broadband accessibility, and we're the state with the 4th highest amount. So they were real happy to announce that.
That is excellent.
Yeah, and I know it might not affect us in the city so much, but we know we have a lot of areas that don't have good service. So that should be a good thing for the state. Okay, we're to our last public comment section for the night. And if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to come forward and speak, now's your opportunity for that. We ask that you state your name, address, and you'll be given 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Rod Bauer with RCL Construction. Just wanted to take a moment to say thank you very much. I appreciate your business on the last phase as well as this phase. And I understand that there's some concern over just having one bid, but I want to assure you that we've been looking forward to this job for the last year. And a lot of the subcontractors are the same subs that are mobilized on phase 1. So we've been kind of carving out enough labor left and focusing on this job. So although we didn't have any competitors, we knew we were competing with the budget, and we knew it was substantially over budget. So everybody, I feel like we had good numbers from the subs as well as ourselves going into it. And to have a project that has the amount of labor that it's going to take for this job within 25, 30 minutes of our office, it's a great thing for our people and our subcontractors. So I really appreciate the award. Thank you.
And thank you. Okay, is there anyone on Zoom?
Nobody on Zoom.
And anyone with their emails?
No comments.
Okay, all right. So in that case, what we're going to do next is we're going to go into a short recess. And then when we come back, we're going to be in a closed session. So we'll just be allowed to have staff with us at that point. Okay?
Vice Mayor, can we have the motion for the closed session prior to the recess, please?
Sure. Can I have a motion that we'll go into closed session
I move that we go into closed session
After the recess, second.
after the recess.
after the recess?
You'll have to read the full motion. It has to be part of the record as to why we're going in, and then we'll have to do a roll call vote.
I move that we consider moving in a closed session to consider, to consult with the city attorney regarding trial or settlement strategy in connection with the city of Mount Pleasant versus Michelle Lang. I read the whole thing. All right. At al. Court of Claims Case number 23-000034-MB, because an open meeting would have a detrimental financial effect on the litigation or settlement position of this city.
Thank you for that reading and that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, and we'll go to a roll call vote.
Commissioner Wingard,
Yes.
Commissioner Chapman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bush,
Yes.
Commissioner Eke is absent, Commissioner Asman,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Alsager,
Yes.
and Mayor Pushbacher is absent. Motion carries.
Okay.